Okay. I'm going to begin with kind of like a script. David is a boy from a dysfunctional home. His parents don't give him any positive attention. Jacob is a regular student with a slightly short temper. David approaches two of his classmates and said, "When did you say the test is again? When did you say the test is again?" David and Judah just keep going on with their conversation without acknowledging the question David asked. He persists. "When did you say the test was changed to again?" Finally, Jacob explodes and says, "Shut up! Get out of here!" Scene number 2. The same David and Jacob. David serves lunch to make some extra money. The sign clearly says you can only take one roll. But his friend, Jacob, always takes 2. So he confronts him day in, day out. "Jacob, why'd you take 2 rolls? What are you going to do to stop me?" I think you all get where I'm going. Despite a robust character development curriculum and a culture that focuses on good character being the most important thing, we too have issues like I just described. Snubbing, sometimes clickiness, bullying. I will say, though, that the story I told you is a rare occurrence. In a high school of 3,000, not 3,000, a high school of 300, the whole institution is 2,200. Things like I just described to you, I would say, happen twice a year, where there's a specific instance that really needs to be dealt with from an administrative level. We'll come back to that when we talk about the solution. A little bit of background. Mount Sinai, where the Torah was given, was humble. Okay? What do I mean by that? Our midrashim, or analytical descriptions of the Torah, teach us that Mount Sinai was the smallest mountain, and it wasn't pushing its agenda, so to speak. The other mountains in the region were telling God, "I'm the largest, I have the most beautiful vegetation. You should give the Torah on me." Mount Sinai didn't say anything, it just kind of sat there. Smaller mountain, no vegetation or not so much, and ultimately, that's where the Torah was given. Our sages continue that it's not just a nice message that Har Sinai was where the Torah was given, but it's the underpinnings for the fact that, as I said earlier, even though we're people of the book and we spend a lot of time studying and certainly a lot of time conforming to the rules, it's all rendered useless and worthless, really is a better word than useless, if we don't treat our friends properly. In the Talmud, there was a great sage called Hillel. He summarized this context in one sentence. What happened was a student of his came and said, I don't really want to be an observant Jew anymore. But if you can teach me the whole Torah while I'm standing on one foot, I will continue to be a loyal, devout, religious Jew for the rest of my life. Hillel said, that's easy. The entire Torah is what is hateful to you, don't do to somebody else. In other words, treat people in the manner you would like to be treated. Everything else, all the other books, all the other interpretations, are just an explanation of that. Go study it. And that disciple went on to be one of the leaders of the next generation. In 2017, things are not much different. From a very young age, we try and inculcate what we call midos, which is character traits, our midos. And we do this in a very interesting form. I will admit that the chorus I kind of know how to sing, but the first stanza I don't. Like a bird without wings, or a bell that doesn't ring, like a plane without a pilot, or a heart that does not beat. Midos are the way we act and how we think and feel. The Torah shows us just what we should do. So if you want to do what's right and really be a mensch, you've got to have good midos through and through. Now my kids would really yell at me because they play this all the time and I really only know the chorus. But we don't do this to be cute, although it is cute. But if you Google the word midos, you will find approximately 100 episodes of Midos Machine or Dr. Midos. And really kids learn through entertainment the values which we want to see in them later in life. In Yeshiva Darchei Torah, which I mentioned earlier, is a school of 2,200 students. We grow every year, so last year we were 2,100. we've continued along that line of nursery rhymes and then taken it through to the older grades. In kindergarten, we begin with Rabbi Bender, who's the dean of our school, teaching the kindergarten students about a midah every week, about a character trait every week. They're learning anyways the Aleph Beis. They're also learning ABCs. Aleph Beis is the ABCs of Hebrew. So he comes in once a week, the week they're learning about Aleph, and he says Aleph stands for emes, honesty. These are just some examples. The whole thing is in your handout. Gemilos Chasadim, Gimel, that's 2 weeks later, kindness to others, happiness, valuing peace, and so on and so forth. Now, it's one thing to teach it, but then he not only says it over and over, he doesn't spend 5 minutes in there, he tells them a whole story each week about that trait. So when Aleph is for emes, he's going to tell a whole story about being honest and what happens when you're not honest. And if you walk into any class in the preschool or even the elementary school, and you would try to test the students on this, they know it backwards and forwards. I see it most often not in a classroom, but when I go fundraising with Rabbi Bender, and their cute little kids running around, we'll often have they'll come running over to him, and he'll say Aleph is for emes, and then they'll just go the rest. So we really try. We've continued along these lines in the elementary school with a project called Midos Mission. So we made our own character, our own superhero, if you will, and every 6 weeks the midah changes. And for that 6 weeks, every teacher in that division, grades 1 through 5, will reinforce that midah day in, day out, tell stories, so on and so forth. And it will culminate with a video and an assembly for the whole grades 1 through 5, which is about 600 kids. And in the video will be the children role-playing that midah. There's some links in the presentation if you want to take a look further. Every week in Yeshiva Darchei Torah, grades 1 through 12, well actually kindergarten I told you about, kindergarten through 12, will have a discourse in the weekly portion of the Torah that you'd expect in a Jewish school. But in Darchei Torah, every week we use the opportunity to bring out a message to teach our students how to be better people, better friends, and even one day husbands, employees, and fathers. Rabbi Bender, who himself teaches the kindergarten, also teaches the junior high school, the high school, and the rabbinical school. Somebody else does the ones in between. And he'll tell you that he's giving the same speech in kindergarten as he is to the junior high school. I didn't have a good picture of the high school, but he's giving the same speech 3 times. He's just bringing it up to their level. Now, obviously, the kindergarten is going to be focused on what Aleph Beis letter they're up to, so it might be slightly off. But when emes comes up in the Torah, he's going to be telling the same types of stories. So in the 14 years they spend in Darchei Torah, they really do get a multitude of opportunities to hear those messages. Obviously, they need to be modeled. They need to be, we very much try to hire rebbeim and teachers who are talent-oriented, driven-oriented, love-oriented, not necessarily just skills and knowledge. Rabbi Bender actually jokes that if you find the division heads from camp or the great camp counselors or the color war generals, those make the best teachers. He was in camp for many years. He still goes up for Shabbos. In the high school, we do have to take it to another level. Okay, so we do that in 2 ways. We do that by having every single morning, just to give you a little bit of an idea of what goes on in a high school classroom in a yeshiva, they come for prayer, davening at 7:15. They finish around 8:15. They eat breakfast. Then they'll spend the rest of their morning from about 9 until 1 or 2 o'clock with the same teacher, studying the Talmud, mostly. But every single Rebbe in that high school, every single teacher in that high school will begin with the study of Musar, which is ethical development. They'll do that in a variety of ways. It will have a text base. It's probably something from one of the classical Balei Musar, who were a period of time where Jews were forgetting their Musar teachings, so the Balei Musar wrote it down, famous books like The Path of the Just, things like that. So it will have a text base, But they'll use it as a springboard to adapt what was written 200 or 300 years ago to what's going on today. There were no iPhones when The Path of the Just was written. That being said, why do we do this every morning? Why first thing? Well, these boys, they're not children really anymore, they're teenagers, really grow to love their Rebbeim and have a very close connection to their Rebbeim, mostly because of the thirst of knowledge that the kids have, at least the more driven boys. And it's very important for them to associate that, which we truly believe, and I alluded to earlier, that you could spend the entire day, I only told you half the schedule, then they go to classes, regular English studies, then they come back for night Seder. I mean, a high school boy, 9th grade, goes from 7:15 to 8:35 3 days a week. So it's a long day. But and most of it is focusing on the laws and the learning and obviously their secular studies. But we really are taught, as Hillel said, that you could spend, if you want to, I said this to someone at dinner last night, even though it's not in my prepared remarks, if you want to visualize that scale that, at least in the Jewish religion, we're always thinking about when it comes to high holidays, your mitzvos or your good deeds on one side and your averos or sins on the other side. So we really believe, and this is written in many places, that you can have a huge pile of mitzvos, and the scale could look like this. But if I go back to the dormitory and I embarrass one of my friends in public, it's considered as if I killed him. And all that's standing up there on the scale is, it's hard to visualize this, is transferred to his bank account. So I just spent 12 hours studying, learning, practicing, and I just lost it all. Now, it doesn't mean there's no redemption. Judaism is based on redemption. God's ability to forgive us and our ability to go apologize. I'm not saying you can never get it back, but it's a very serious thing. So every morning, those high school teachers will lead off with that. In addition, what you have here is actually, there are regular guidance counselors in addition to the Rebbeim. There's also two, what we call a mashkiach ruchani, which means a supervisor of the atmosphere, okay? And there's two of them. This is one of them. And they will give, in addition to Rabbi Bender's discourse on Friday, they'll give an additional discourse that will be more targeted to the grade, 9th grade being Monday night, 10th grade being Tuesday night, so on and so forth. But in addition to just giving a discourse, they don't teach any classes besides that 1 hour a day. They're in their office, as guidance counselors are, and children can come to them with any problem, whether it's a parent problem, a school problem, but mostly what they're there for is to discuss ethical conundrums as they often come up. Back to my problem, and a little bit of a solution, I hope. So, I'm sure you all remember me saying shut up and leave me alone and all those things, but the problem was that some kids were not being nice to others. I was asked to be dramatic. I hope I didn't offend anybody. When there's a specific incident of bullying in the high school level, a member of our staff, usually the one who's closest to the victim, will approach him and discuss with him what he's doing to invite this treatment on him. Yes, you heard me right. It sounds like we're saying it's the victim's fault. It's not that we're saying that out there in the world it's the victim's fault, but often we've found from trial and error that when we focus solely on the person inflicting the pain, that we don't actually solve the problem. What do I mean? There's plenty of socially awkward children in my high school of 300 kids who don't get bullied and aren't bothered and actually make friends. It's the 1 or 2 a year that don't make friends that are usually doing something to call it upon themselves, to invite it upon themselves. So while I'm going to get in a second to what we do with the offender, we find that it's very important to address the offendee. For example, that David, who I mentioned earlier, his mother doesn't give him any attention, right? He comes from a dysfunctional home. And the only way he gets attention from his mother, just like the 3-year-old who acts out to get attention, David is not going to act out because he's a little puny kid, but what he does is he encourages others to inflict their wrath on him so he can go home and complain to his mother. Because then his mother goes crazy and calls the school, and I want a meeting with Rabbi Bender and this and that, because that's the only way he gets her attention at night. So we have a member of the staff who will meet with those students and explain to them the proper way to get attention and really get down and into it. On to the offender, because that's certainly important also. Okay? Usually all it will take is something as simple as approaching him. Also, we'll try and choose a staff member who's closest to him. And 300 is a large high school. The high school principals, of which there are 2 secular studies, 2 rabbinical studies. Rabbi Bender, the dean, is intimately involved, and his son, who's kind of his associate dean, is also very involved. They meet once every 2 weeks for about 4 hours, in addition to the whole school principal staff, where we get together also about every 2 weeks for another 3-4 hours. So they'll discuss these issues and they'll plan out how to best deal with it. And it's usually something as simple as explaining to the student, es passt nicht, which means it's beneath you, it's unbecoming of you, it's incongruent with the type of student you are and that you strive to be, to treat one of your friends this way. Yes, he's doing something silly, he's doing something he shouldn't be doing, but you, rather than explain why that child's doing it, because it's none of his business that his mother doesn't give him attention, we'll usually draw an analogy to, you wouldn't do that to your friend who has muscular dystrophy or terminal illness or some other disability. Now you're all thinking, why are we associating them with children with disabilities? Well, one thing I left out in the background of Darchei Torah is Darchei Torah is a regular school, whatever that means. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. But there's 2,200 students. Some of them are wheelchair bound. Some of them are blind. Some of them were born deaf. And one thing that Rabbi Bender always says is that you think we're doing a favor for the boy who's in a wheelchair or the boy who's blind or the boy who's deaf. But what we're really doing is doing a favor for everybody else in their classroom. Because this boy of Rami, who has muscular dystrophy, he's not the first in the school, is taken care of by his peers all day long. Yes, he has a home health aide, nurse, whatever. He goes home to a family that he lives with. But these boys really take care of him. They feed him. They help him go to the bathroom. Sorry for being blunt. And it really changes the boys to the fact that, I know it's a little interesting how we measure success, but in the yeshiva world, all marriages are arranged to some extent. Doesn't mean you don't meet your wife first. You do. But they're set up for the most part. And everybody is constantly calling Rabbi Bender, I want a Darchei boy. And the reason they want a Darchei boy is not only because of its scholastic achievements, but because of the character building of good husbands, good fathers that it possesses. The truth is, this really isn't in my prepared remarks. But there have been times, I'm going to say it anyway, there have been times where I was planning on leaving Darchei Torah. And for whatever reasons, I stayed. And this summer, my 6th child was born with Down syndrome. And what I told everybody there was how it was so apparent to me, although it has been many times, that the hand of God was really guiding me to stay at Darchei Torah. Not because Darchei Torah is accepting of children with special needs, not because Darchei Torah anyways this year was starting a class for children with Down syndrome, but because we live in a community that was changed by a man, Rabbi Bender, who taught everybody that everybody deserves a chance and everybody deserves to be treated properly. I was asked to give you a picture of what goes on in yeshiva. I hope I did that, but I also attached a link in the very end, which is actually a dramatization of what we do, which we showed at our dinner last year. This is just a map view of our campus, and I put arrows, and with this I'll leave you, because I think it's very important. There are a lot of yeshivas that don't have a campus, and I just told you how wonderful we are. But I think that a campus, when you have the opportunity, really lends itself to that. This community was a very drug-ridden, prostitute-ridden community. And about 15 years ago, Rabbi Bender built these houses. When nobody would live there, he had to give them away. And all staff they're all owned by either staff members or related to staff members, and it really created a campus. Then we built this. I actually live here. We built that about 7 years ago. And now there are 200 families right around the school that really contribute to that full picture of modeling and, so on and so forth. And that's it. Thank you.